The night was quiet, almost unnaturally so, as Elon Musk stepped out of SpaceX headquarters. The sharp click of his polished shoes against the pavement echoed in the deserted parking lot. He had just concluded a high-stakes meeting, a whirlwind of ideas and challenges that left his mind racing. The evening sky above was painted in deep indigo hues, punctuated by stars faintly shimmering against the glow of the city lights. A few street lamps buzzed intermittently, casting a dim, almost eerie light across the empty rows of cars. Elon adjusted his blazer, glancing at his phone, his thoughts already drifting toward the next project on his ever-expanding list. But as he approached his sleek Tesla, something caught his eye. A few parking spaces away, under the flickering light of a worn-out street lamp, stood an elderly woman. She was struggling with a grocery cart, her frail figure hunched as she attempted to maneuver it toward an old, battered car. Her movements were labored, her breath visibly heavy in the cold night air. The sight was jarring against the backdrop of technological opulence that surrounded SpaceX. Her car, dented and rusted, seemed to belong to another era entirely. One of her tires sagged lifelessly, a flat that had clearly derailed her evening plans. The grocery bags in her cart threatened to spill over, and she paused frequently, pressing a hand to her back as if the effort was taking a toll. Elon hesitated, standing by his car. His mind was a battlefield of obligations. He had emails to send, plans to finalize, and a pressing desire to retreat to the quiet of his home. Yet his eyes lingered on the woman, and for a moment, he saw his mother in her, a fiercely independent figure who had always taught him the value of kindness, no matter how busy life became. Still, the tension lingered. Would he step forward, or would he let the moment pass, rationalizing that someone else would surely help her? The woman's struggle intensified as the cart's wheel snagged on a crack in the pavement, causing one of her bags to tumble to the ground. A few oranges rolled across the lot, their vibrant color stark against the gray asphalt. The decision was made in an instant. Elon slipped his phone into his pocket and walked toward her, his footsteps measured but purposeful. As he approached, the woman looked up, startled, her weathered face illuminated by the flickering streetlight. Her eyes held a mixture of surprise and weariness, as if she was unsure whether to expect kindness or indifference from a stranger. "Let me help you with that," Elon said, his voice calm and reassuring. The woman hesitated, clutching the handle of the cart tightly. "Oh no, dear, you don't have to." "I insist," he interrupted gently, crouching to retrieve the fallen oranges and place them back in her bag. His tone left no room for argument, yet it carried an undeniable warmth. As he steadied the cart and began pushing it toward her car, she studied him with cautious gratitude. It was clear she had no idea who he was, and Elon didn't offer an explanation. For now, he was just a kind stranger lending a hand. "What happened to your tire?" he asked, noting the sagging rubber. "It went flat while I was shopping," she replied, sighing. "I thought I could make it home, but it seems I overestimated myself." Elon nodded thoughtfully. "Let's see what we can do about that." And just like that, under the dim glow of the parking lot lights, an ordinary act of kindness began to unfold, one that would change both of their lives in ways neither could have anticipated. The night, once quiet, now hummed with the unspoken promise of something extraordinary. Elon crouched down beside the flat tire, examining it under the dim light. His fingers traced the jagged tear in the rubber as he let out a quiet breath. "This one's beyond saving," he said, glancing up at the elderly woman. Her hands wrung nervously in front of her, the light reflecting off her weathered wedding ring. She seemed hesitant, as though unsure if she was imposing on him. "I really appreciate this, young man," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't expect anyone to stop. People are usually too busy." Elon offered her a small smile. "Sometimes slowing down for a moment isn't such a bad thing," he replied, standing up and wiping his hands on a handkerchief he'd pulled from his pocket. She watched as he walked back to his car, the sleek Tesla looking more like a spaceship next to her aging sedan. Elon opened the trunk and retrieved a small toolkit. As he returned, he noticed the woman still eyeing him warily, as if trying to place where she might have seen him before. "You carry tools in that fancy car?" she asked, a hint of humor breaking through her initial apprehension. Elon chuckled lightly as he knelt back down beside the tire. You'd be surprised how often they come in handy. As he worked, she began to loosen up. "I'm Mary," she said, her voice a touch more confident now. "Elon," he replied simply, not expecting her reaction to be anything more than polite acknowledgement. "Well, Elon, I don't know how I'd have managed tonight without you," Mary said, her gratitude evident in the way she looked at him. "It's been one of those weeks, you know. Nothing seems to go right." He nodded, glancing up briefly. "We all have those." He focused on loosening the lug nuts, his movements precise and deliberate. "You seem like a busy man," Mary continued, watching him. "Are you sure I'm not keeping you from something important?" Elon paused, considering her question. The truth was, his schedule was packed to the brim, with deadlines that would make most people's heads spin. Yet in this moment, kneeling on cold asphalt with grease on his hands, none of that seemed to matter. "You're not keeping me from anything I can't handle later," he said, his tone steady. "Besides, it's not every day I get to help someone who clearly deserves a break." Mary's lips twitched into a faint smile, though her eyes remained guarded. "You don't even know me," she pointed out. Elon tightened the final lug nut, then stood and dusted off his hands. "Maybe not," he said, looking her in the eye. "But I can tell you've been through a lot. And sometimes even strangers need to step in to make things easier." Her face softened at his words, and for the first time she let herself relax completely. "Well, you're a rare one, that's for sure." As Elon loaded the damaged tire into her trunk, he couldn't help but notice the worn-out state of her car. The upholstery was frayed and the dashboard had seen better days. It was clear that Mary had been managing on her own for a long time, likely putting her needs on hold to make ends meet. "What do you do, Mary?" he asked casually, hoping to learn more about her. "Oh, I've been retired for years now," she said, a wistful note in her voice. "My husband used to handle most of the practical things. He was an engineer, a brilliant one. But after he passed, well," she trailed off, her expression clouding. Elon caught the shift in her mood and decided not to press further, but her words lingered in his mind. There was something about the way she spoke, the quiet pride in her voice when she mentioned her husband, that stirred his curiosity. As they finished loading the last of her groceries into the trunk, Elon felt a sense of finality to the moment. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than just a random act of kindness. "Take care of yourself, Mary," he said as she got into her car. "You too, Elon," she replied, her voice warm. As she drove off into the night, Elon stood there for a moment, watching the taillights disappear. Back at his Tesla, he couldn't help but glance at the empty parking space she'd left behind, a strange mix of emotions settling over him. He didn't know it yet, but this small act of kindness was about to set in motion something far greater than he could have imagined. As Mary's car disappeared into the night, Elon remained by his Tesla, his thoughts lingering on the brief encounter. There was something about her, a quiet strength beneath her weathered exterior, that resonated with him. She had spoken with pride about her late husband, but her words carried an undertone of struggle and loneliness that Elon couldn't ignore. For all her gratitude and humor, it was clear life hadn't been kind to her in recent years. The following morning, as Elon sipped his usual cup of coffee and reviewed SpaceX's latest progress reports, his mind kept drifting back to Mary. He replayed their conversation in his head, remembering the subtle hesitation in her voice when she spoke about her husband. It was as if she wanted to say more but held back, wary of burdening a stranger with her troubles. Elon felt an unusual pull to know more about her story, not out of curiosity alone, but a genuine desire to understand the life she had lived. Later that day, Elon made a few discreet inquiries, tasking one of his assistants with finding out more about Mary's circumstances. It wasn't the kind of request he made often, but something about her had touched a nerve. He told himself it was simply to ensure she was okay, but deep down, he suspected it was more than that. In the meantime, he continued with his usual whirlwind of meetings and deadlines, yet the memory of Mary's kind but tired face refused to fade. By the end of the week, Elon received the information he had requested. Mary lived in a modest, aging house on the outskirts of town, one that had likely seen better days. She had been a homemaker for much of her life, supporting her husband Frank while he worked as an engineer. Frank had been part of a team that worked on early aerospace technology, projects that paved the way for advancements Elon himself now pursued. It was a revelation that caught him off guard. Frank's name was unfamiliar to him, but the work he had been part of wasn't. Elon felt a deep respect for the contributions of those forgotten pioneers, and now he understood Mary's quiet pride when she spoke of her husband. Yet, the story took a heartbreaking turn. After Frank passed away, Mary was left to fend for herself on a modest pension, with no children nearby to offer support. She had been living alone for years, scraping by and relying on her resilience to navigate life's challenges. The details unsettled Elon. Despite his success and the scale of his ambitions, he had always been aware of the sacrifices made by countless others whose names would never be celebrated. Frank was one of them, a man who had likely worked tirelessly without receiving the recognition or financial security he deserved. And Mary, the woman who had supported him, was now bearing the weight of that oversight. Elon's thoughts were interrupted by an email notification, but he ignored it, his gaze fixed on the screen displaying Mary's profile. He couldn't help but think of his own mother, who had faced her share of struggles to raise him and his siblings. It was a reminder that even the strongest among us sometimes needed a helping hand. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elon made a decision. He would reach out to Mary, not as a wealthy entrepreneur or a public figure, but as a man moved by the quiet dignity of her story. Pulling out his phone, he drafted a message to his assistant, outlining a plan to reconnect with Mary in a meaningful way. For now, he kept the specifics vague, unsure of what shape his efforts would take, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let their encounter be a fleeting moment. As the stars emerged one by one, Elon felt a renewed sense of purpose. Life had given him extraordinary opportunities, and now he saw a chance to give something back. This wasn't about charity or publicity. It was about honoring the legacy of someone who had contributed to a field that defined his own life's work. And it was about ensuring that Mary, a woman who had endured so much, would finally receive the kindness she so clearly deserved. Elon's plan to reconnect with Mary was already taking shape in his mind, but he needed more information before taking the next step. He wanted to ensure that whatever he did would truly make a difference in her life. The memory of her worn car, her frail hands, and the pride in her voice when she spoke of her late husband lingered in his thoughts, driving him to act. Returning to his office the next day, Elon called in one of his trusted team members. With quiet determination, he shared the details of his encounter with Mary, careful to emphasize the importance of discretion. He didn't want her to feel intruded upon or embarrassed by his interest. His assistant, accustomed to Elon's unique blend of curiosity and compassion, nodded and promised to look into her story. Over the next several days, Elon buried himself in work as usual, juggling meetings, presentations, and brainstorming sessions for his various ventures. But even in the chaos, his thoughts frequently wandered back to Mary. He wondered what her days were like, whether she had anyone to rely on, and how her life had changed since her husband's passing. For a man used to solving some of the world's most complex problems, the uncertainty gnawed at him in a way he couldn't quite explain. When the report on Mary finally landed on his desk, Elon opened it with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The first thing he noticed was a photo of her modest home, a small, aging structure tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. The paint was peeling and the lawn was overgrown, but there was a warmth to it that spoke of years of care and love. Beneath the photo was a detailed summary of her life, a story of perseverance and quiet strength. Mary had been married to Frank Mitchell, an aerospace engineer whose work had been instrumental in early rocket development. Elon's eyes widened as he scanned the names of the projects Frank had contributed to. They were the foundation upon which modern space exploration had been built, innovations that had paved the way for companies like SpaceX to exist. Yet Frank's name was one Elon had never encountered before, a glaring omission in the annals of aerospace history. The more he read, the more the story unfolded like a tragic yet inspiring tale. Frank had been a brilliant mind, but his career had been cut short by corporate politics and budget cuts during a particularly turbulent era for the industry. Despite his contributions, he had never received the recognition or the financial rewards he deserved. When he passed away unexpectedly, Mary had been left with little more than his memory and a small pension that barely covered her needs. Elon leaned back in his chair, the weight of the story settling over him. Frank had been a forgotten pioneer, one of the countless individuals whose brilliance had been overshadowed by larger, more prominent names. And Mary, the woman who had stood by his side, had been left to navigate life's challenges alone. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of legacy, even in fields as monumental as aerospace. Elon felt a deep sense of responsibility, not just as someone who had benefited from the work of those like Frank, but as a human being who believed in honoring those who had paved the way for others. The report also included small but significant details about Mary's life. She volunteered at a local community center, helping others despite her own struggles. She had a grandson, Jake, who was studying engineering but lived out of state and visited rarely. These glimpses into her life painted a picture of a woman who, despite her hardships, continued to embody resilience and grace. Elon closed the report, his decision solidified. This wasn't just about honoring Frank's legacy, it was about giving Mary the recognition and support she had never asked for, but so deeply deserved. He drafted an email to his team, outlining the first steps of a plan that would intertwine Mary's story with the larger narrative of aerospace history. It wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a way to ensure that the sacrifices made by Frank and by Mary would finally be acknowledged. With the details of Mary's story fresh in his mind, Elon felt a growing sense of urgency. He wasn't content with simply acknowledging her struggles privately. He wanted to make a real, tangible difference in her life. The image of her kind yet weary face, paired with the legacy of her late husband's work, pushed him into action. Late that evening, as the hum of activity around SpaceX headquarters began to quiet, Elon sat at his desk, outlining the first steps of his plan. He envisioned something that would not only honor Frank's contributions, but also provide Mary with the comfort and security she deserved. It wasn't just about financial assistance. It was about restoring dignity to a life shaped by resilience and sacrifice. Elon decided to begin discreetly, ensuring that Mary wouldn't feel overwhelmed or singled out. He reached out to his teams at both Tesla and SpaceX, instructing them to assist in creating a plan that combined their resources and expertise. The core of the idea was simple yet profound: honor Frank's forgotten work while securing a brighter future for Mary. However, Elon insisted that his involvement remain anonymous for now. He wanted Mary to feel appreciated, not indebted. To begin, Elon arranged for Tesla to quietly assess Mary's aging car. Without her knowledge, they planned to replace it with one of their newest models, a vehicle that would not only ease her daily life, but also symbolize the recognition her family had long deserved. The car would come with lifetime maintenance, ensuring that Mary would never have to worry about it again. Simultaneously, he reached out to SpaceX's philanthropic foundation, proposing that they establish a new initiative to honor unsung heroes in the aerospace industry. The initiative would highlight individuals like Frank, whose contributions had been overlooked, and ensure their legacies were preserved for future generations. The first honoree, of course, would be Frank Mitchell. A wing of the SpaceX campus would be dedicated to his memory, complete with a plaque detailing his work and its impact on modern space exploration. But it wasn't enough for Elon to focus on the past. He wanted to secure Mary's present and future as well. He learned that her grandson, Jake, was studying engineering, a career path likely inspired by his grandfather. Elon saw an opportunity to bridge the family's legacy with its future. He arranged for Jake to be offered an internship at Tesla, providing him with the resources and mentorship to carry on Frank's work in a way that would make his family proud. Despite all the logistical steps, Elon felt the need for a personal touch. Late one night, after hours of meetings and emails, he sat down to write a letter. He began by thanking Mary for sharing her story and expressed his admiration for her husband's contributions to the aerospace industry. Elon wrote about how Frank's work had inspired countless advancements, including those made by SpaceX, and how his team had benefited from the foundations Frank had laid. He assured Mary that Frank's legacy would no longer be forgotten. As he signed the letter, Elon felt a rare sense of fulfillment. The projects he worked on often involved abstract ideas of progress and the future, but this plan was deeply personal. It wasn't about building rockets or cars, it was about making a real difference in someone's life. The next step was delivering the letter and setting the plan into motion. For now, Elon kept the details to himself, savoring the anticipation of what was to come. He envisioned Mary's reaction, not just to the gestures themselves, but to the recognition of her and her husband's unwavering dedication. He knew the world often overlooked people like Mary and Frank, but this time, their story would shine. A few days later, Mary sat at her kitchen table, staring at the letter in her hands. It was printed on heavy, expensive stationery with the SpaceX logo embossed at the top. The letter invited her to a special event at the company's headquarters, described as a ceremony honoring local heroes who had made meaningful contributions to the community. Mary read the letter several times, her fingers brushing over the elegant script, unable to shake the feeling that there had been some mistake. She thought back to the man who had helped her in the parking lot. Elon. Could he have had something to do with this? The thought seemed absurd. He'd been kind, yes, but surely he wasn't connected to this massive company. Still, the coincidence was hard to ignore. After wrestling with her doubts, Mary decided she would attend. If nothing else, she was curious and honored to be included in such an event. The day of the ceremony arrived, and Mary dressed in her best clothes, a simple but well-maintained outfit that had seen its share of important occasions. She felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension as she arrived at the SpaceX headquarters, her aging sedan pulling into a sea of sleek, futuristic vehicles. The sprawling campus gleamed under the afternoon sun, its towering buildings and innovative architecture standing as a testament to human ingenuity. Mary couldn't help but feel small and out of place among the polished attendees milling about. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Guests sipped champagne and exchanged conversations in low, confident tones. Mary kept to herself, taking in her surroundings. The walls were lined with exhibits showcasing SpaceX's achievements, models of rockets, photos of launches, and plaques celebrating notable milestones. She marveled at the scale of it all, feeling a pang of pride for humanity's progress, yet wondering why she had been invited to such a grand affair. As she wandered through the room, an usher approached and guided her to a seat near the front of the main hall. Mary clutched her invitation tightly, her heart pounding as the lights dimmed and the event began. A tall man took the stage, introducing himself as the evening's host. He spoke of innovation, perseverance, and the importance of remembering those who laid the groundwork for progress. The words resonated with Mary, though she still didn't understand her connection to the event. Then, to her surprise, Elon Musk walked onto the stage. He was greeted with thunderous applause, but Mary sat frozen, her mind racing. It was him, the man who had helped her that night. She watched as he addressed the audience, his voice calm yet commanding. Tonight we honor not only innovation but also the unsung heroes whose contributions have made our achievements possible, Elon said, his eyes scanning the room. And sometimes these heroes are not the ones in the spotlight, but those who supported them tirelessly. Mary's breath caught as Elon's gaze seemed to land on her. He smiled slightly before continuing. I'd like to share a story about one such hero, someone whose work helped shape the very foundation of aerospace technology as we know it. That hero is Frank Mitchell. The room fell silent as a large screen behind Elon displayed photos of Frank at work, diagrams of his contributions to early rocket designs, and a brief biography. Mary's hands trembled as she stared at her husband's image. It felt surreal, as if she were in a dream. Elon turned toward her, and tonight we are honored to have Frank's wife, Mary Mitchell, here with us. Mary, would you please join me on stage? The audience erupted in applause as the spotlight turned to Mary. She hesitated, overwhelmed by emotion, but the usher gently guided her toward the stage. As she walked up, the clapping grew louder, and she felt tears welling in her eyes. Elon extended his hand, helping her up the last step. Mary, he said, his voice kind but steady, this is a moment to celebrate Frank's legacy and your unwavering support for him. For the first time in decades, Mary felt the weight of her and Frank's sacrifices lift, replaced by a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years. As Mary stood beside Elon, the magnitude of the moment overwhelmed her. The dazzling lights, the sea of faces in the audience, and the unveiled plaque bearing Frank's name felt surreal. She reached out to touch the polished bronze, her fingers trembling against the engraved words. The audience, moved by her quiet reaction, offered another round of applause, but Mary barely heard it. She was lost in the memories of a life she had shared with Frank, a life filled with dreams and sacrifices that had finally been recognized. Elon stepped back, giving Mary the space to process what was unfolding. He gestured toward the large screen behind them, and another image appeared, a rendering of the new SpaceX research wing. Beneath it, bold letters read, "The Frank Mitchell Research Wing, honoring innovation and perseverance." The room fell silent as the weight of the dedication settled over the crowd. Mary turned toward Elon, her voice breaking as she spoke. I never thought I'd see something like this. Frank would have been so proud. He spent his whole life believing in what could be, even when no one else did. The audience leaned in, captivated by her words. Encouraged by their quiet attention, Mary continued. Frank used to talk about the stars like they were right in our backyard. He believed that humanity's greatest gift was its ability to dream big, to look up at the night sky and see endless possibilities. But he also knew that dreams came with a price. She paused, gathering her thoughts as emotion swelled in her chest. There were so many nights when he worked until dawn, sketching designs, running calculations, and sometimes even doubting himself. He didn't do it for fame or recognition. He did it because he wanted to be part of something bigger than himself. And now, to see his name here, in this incredible place, it feels like everything he worked for wasn't in vain. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she looked out at the audience. Frank used to say that every great achievement was built on the shoulders of those who came before. Tonight, I see that truth reflected here, not just in this plaque or this dedication, but in all of you who continue the work he believed in so deeply. The room erupted into applause, a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. Engineers, scientists, and executives alike rose to their feet, clapping and cheering in a show of respect not just for Frank, but for Mary as well. Elon stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. "You've said it beautifully, Mary," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Frank's work laid the foundation for what we're doing today. And his story reminds us that innovation isn't just about the technology. It's about the people who dare to dream and the sacrifices they make to bring those dreams to life." As the applause finally subsided, Elon turned to the audience. "I hope that every person who walks through the doors of the Frank Mitchell Research Wing remembers this. Progress is a collective effort, built on countless moments of hard work, sacrifice, and belief in something greater. Tonight, we honor one of those moments, and we thank Mary for sharing Frank's story with us." Mary looked up at him, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying a depth of emotion that words could barely contain. "Thank you for seeing him." The audience began clapping again, this time slower and more deliberate, as if to let every clap echo the sentiment shared by everyone in the room. Mary took a deep breath, standing a little taller as the weight of decades of unspoken grief began to lift. For the first time in years, she felt not just seen, but celebrated. As she stepped off the stage with Elon's help, she turned back for one last glance at the plaque. The name Frank Mitchell shone brightly under the lights, a permanent reminder that dreams, no matter how unrecognized at the time, had the power to shape the future. Mary smiled through her tears, knowing that Frank's legacy would live on, not just in the work he had done, but in the hearts of those who now carried it forward. As the applause in the hall began to fade, Mary was gently led from the stage by Elon, her emotions still raw from the overwhelming recognition of Frank's legacy. She sat quietly in the front row, trying to process the extraordinary moment she had just experienced. But the evening wasn't over yet. Elon returned to the stage, a warm smile on his face as he addressed the audience again. "Tonight we've taken a moment to honor the past," he began, his voice steady and resonant. "But I believe it's just as important to look toward the future, and to ensure that those who have given so much are supported as they move forward. Mary's story has inspired all of us, and now it's time to make sure she receives the care and recognition she deserves." The audience leaned forward in anticipation, their eyes fixed on Elon. He glanced toward Mary, who looked back at him with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. "Mary," he continued, "we know that you've faced challenges over the years, quietly persevering through difficulties that many would find insurmountable. Tonight, we want to make things a little easier for you." He gestured to the side of the stage, and once again, the sleek Tesla Model X was rolled into view, its glossy black exterior gleaming under the lights. "This car is yours, Mary," Elon announced, his tone kind but firm. "It's not just a gift. It's a promise that you'll never have to worry about your transportation again. And with lifetime maintenance included, you'll always have peace of mind. The audience broke into applause, but Mary was too stunned to move. She stared at the car, her hand covering her mouth as tears filled her eyes. The idea of owning something so luxurious, so reliable, seemed almost unreal after years of driving her old, unreliable sedan. She turned to Elon, shaking her head slightly as if to say, "Are you serious?" Elon smiled. "You deserve this, Mary. And there's more." He paused, letting the moment settle before continuing. "We've also learned that your home could use some updates to make it more comfortable and safe. Starting next week, teams from SpaceX and Tesla's charitable foundations will begin a full renovation of your house. We'll ensure it's a space where you can truly feel at ease, a home that reflects the incredible life you've lived." The audience applauded again, and Mary could barely contain her emotions. Her mind raced as she thought about her small, aging home and all the repairs she had put off for lack of resources. The idea of it being transformed into a place of comfort and beauty was almost too much to comprehend. "And finally," Elon continued, his tone softening, "we know how much Frank's legacy means to you. That's why we've also reached out to your grandson, Jake. He's pursuing engineering, isn't he?" Mary nodded, her voice caught in her throat. "Well," Elon said with a smile, "Jake has accepted an internship with Tesla. We're excited to have him join us and continue the legacy of innovation that Frank started." At this, Mary let out a soft gasp, her hands flying to her chest. The audience erupted in applause once more, their admiration for Elon's generosity evident in every cheer. Mary's tears flowed freely now, her heart swelling with gratitude and relief. For so long she had carried the weight of her family's struggles, never daring to hope for such opportunities. As the applause subsided, Elon stepped down from the stage and knelt beside her. "Mary," he said gently, his voice filled with sincerity, "you've given so much. Your support for Frank, your strength for your family, your resilience through hardship. It's our turn to give back to you." Mary took his hand, her grip trembling but firm. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You've given me hope. You've given my family a future." The crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation, the room filled with the sound of clapping hands and the energy of collective admiration. In that moment, Mary felt the weight of years of struggle lifting, replaced by a profound sense of gratitude and renewal. Her life, once marked by quiet perseverance, had been transformed in ways she had never imagined. The story of Mary and Frank Mitchell spread like wildfire in the days that followed the event at SpaceX. Clips of the ceremony, where Elon Musk unveiled the plaque honoring Frank's contributions, flooded social media. Photos of Mary's emotional reaction, standing beside the sleek Tesla Model X and the rendering of her renovated home, quickly became symbols of resilience and the transformative power of kindness. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a rare glimpse into the human side of one of the world's busiest and most enigmatic entrepreneurs. Headlines like "Elon Musk honors forgotten aerospace pioneer" and "a life-changing act of kindness" dominated the media. Social media platforms buzzed with discussions, the hashtag Frank Mitchell legacy trending for days. People from all walks of life shared their thoughts, expressing admiration for Elon's gesture and reflecting on how often unsung heroes like Frank go unrecognized. Comments poured in on platforms like Twitter. "This is what humanity needs. Leaders who don't just innovate but also remember those who laid the foundation." And Elon Musk shows us that even in a high-tech world, compassion is the most powerful tool. Amidst the overwhelming positivity, there were also personal stories. Individuals shared anecdotes about their own relatives who had worked tirelessly in various industries without recognition. The narrative of Frank and Mary became a rallying point for celebrating everyday heroes whose contributions often went unnoticed. Inspired by the story, grassroots initiatives emerged, with people reaching out to help elderly neighbors, fund scholarships in memory of forgotten pioneers, and even repair homes for those in need. For Elon's employees, the impact was immediate and profound. Engineers and staff at SpaceX and Tesla spoke openly about how the event had shifted their perspective. One software developer wrote on the company's internal forum, "Working on cutting-edge technology can make you forget the human stories behind it." This event reminded me why I got into engineering in the first place, to build on the dreams of those who came before us. Another employee shared a heartfelt post saying, "I've been so focused on deadlines that I forgot the importance of community and compassion." Mary's story has inspired me to reach out to my own family more often. At SpaceX's new Frank Mitchell Research Wing, the plaque stood proudly in the entryway, becoming a source of daily motivation for the teams working within. Employees would pause to read its inscription, often bringing visiting family members to see it and recounting the story of the man behind the name. The wing quickly became a symbol of innovation rooted in gratitude, a reminder that progress is built not just on technology, but on the dreams and sacrifices of those who came before. For Mary, life took on a new rhythm. The renovations to her home brought comfort she hadn't felt in years, transforming her modest house into a sanctuary where she could finally relax and enjoy her days. The Tesla Model X became a cherished part of her routine, allowing her to travel without the constant worry of breakdowns or repair bills. But it wasn't just the material changes that lifted her spirits. It was the newfound sense of community and purpose. Mary found herself at the center of a wave of goodwill. Letters and messages poured in from people inspired by her story, many of them sharing their own struggles and expressing how much her journey meant to them. Touched by the outpouring of support, Mary began volunteering at her local community center with renewed energy, mentoring young people and encouraging them to dream big, just as Frank had. She became an advocate for kindness and recognition, often speaking at local events about the importance of honoring those who work tirelessly behind the scenes. When asked about the changes in her life, Mary would always smile and say, "It's not just about what I've received. It's about what I've been reminded of. That kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change everything." The ripple effects of Elon's gesture continued to grow, touching lives far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Mary's story, once one of quiet perseverance, had become a beacon of hope and inspiration, a testament to the fact that even in a fast-moving, high-tech world, acts of kindness could still resonate deeply, reminding humanity of the importance of compassion and connection. In the quiet of his office a week after the event, Elon sat at his desk, staring out of the window as the sun dipped below the horizon. The whirlwind of media attention, heartfelt messages, and the success of the evening still lingered in his thoughts. Yet, amidst the chaos of his daily responsibilities, it was Mary's smile and the quiet strength she had carried that remained etched in his memory. The story of Frank and Mary Mitchell had not only touched the world, but had stirred something deep within him. Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind drifting to his childhood. He thought about his own mother, a woman of resilience and determination who had shaped his values through her actions. She had taught him that success was hollow without compassion, that true greatness was measured not in achievements alone, but in the lives one touched along the way. For all his ambitious projects and groundbreaking innovations, this small act of kindness had reminded him why he started in the first place: to leave the world better than he found it. The event had become a defining moment, not because of the recognition it brought, but because of the profound sense of purpose it reignited in him. In honoring Frank, he had found a way to reconnect with the human stories behind the technology, the sacrifices that often went unseen but were vital to progress. Miles away, in her newly renovated home, Mary sat in her favorite chair, a cup of tea warming her hands as she looked out at her transformed garden. The past week had been a blur of emotions, but tonight, as the world slowed around her, she allowed herself to truly reflect. For years, she had carried the weight of grief and quiet struggle, believing that the world had long forgotten her and Frank's contributions. Yet, in a single evening, that weight had been lifted. She thought about the young volunteers who had come to her home, eager to share their gratitude and hear her stories about Frank. She thought about Jake, her grandson, who had called her the night before, his voice filled with excitement about his upcoming internship at Tesla. "Grandma," he had said, "it's like everything Grandpa dreamed of is finally happening, and I get to be a part of it." Mary smiled through her tears, her heart full in a way it hadn't been for years. Elon's gesture had not just changed her circumstances, it had restored her faith in humanity, reminding her that even in a fast-paced, often indifferent world, there were still people who cared deeply. She resolved to carry that message forward, to share her story with others in the hope that it might inspire them to see the beauty in small acts of kindness. Back at SpaceX, Elon stood in the newly opened Frank Mitchell Research Wing. The plaque gleamed under the overhead lights, a testament to the power of remembering those who came before. As he traced the engraved letters with his fingers, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just about honoring the past, it was about inspiring the future. Elon turned to his assistant, who stood nearby. "Let's make this the first of many," he said. "There are so many stories like Frank's out there, and they deserve to be told." The assistant nodded, sensing the gravity of his words. As Elon walked away, he felt the weight of the moment settle over him, not as a burden, but as a call to action. He knew that this was only the beginning, that the ripple effects of kindness could spread far beyond what anyone could imagine. In the days that followed, Mary's story continued to inspire countless acts of generosity, from small gestures between neighbors to larger initiatives aimed at recognizing unsung heroes in various fields. The world, if only for a moment, seemed a little brighter, a little kinder. And for those who heard the story of Frank and Mary Mitchell, one message stood out above all: that even the smallest acts of kindness could transform lives in ways no one could foresee. The ripple effect was real, and it started with a single moment: a flat tire, a helping hand, and a decision to see the humanity in someone else.